that the reign of the former ruling party, the Patriotic Front, was marred with so much lawlessness, which was also perpetrated by those within the governance system and their associates. The so-called cadreism, coupled with a high cost of living, was rampant, and the Zambian citizens decided to do away with such a government, hence ushered in the UPND's New Dawn administration. But to the dismay of the public, the New Dawn government has dedicated parts of its efforts and resources to blaming their predecessors for failing to fulfill some of its campaign promises. In a country where the average citizen is barely surviving on $1 per day for a living, citizens are already questioning the move to award huge sums of money as compensation to those who fell victim to the PF's brutality and lawlessness. Others are wondering why those who are being awarded are either UPND senior members or those who are allegedly connected to them in one way or another. Some of the pertinent questions that stakeholders and the general citizenry have been asking since the first case of the consent judgment involving huge sums of compensation recorded under the New Dawn administration. Rethinking the implications of consent judgments is our topic of discussion tonight on the Wednesday edition of The Big Hour. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host as usual. My name is Paul Shingongo. Wynter is former Justice Minister and currently the Opposition Economic Front President. He joins me on The Big Hour to discuss this very important subject. Comrade Kabimba, welcome back to The Big Hour. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Paul, and good evening, dear viewers out there.
Great. Remember, you are catching us live on our 3 platforms. That's DSTV, channel 279. We are also live on the Go TV bouquet, that's channel 27. We're also live on the Top Star, that's our national carrier, on channel 102. But as per custom, also streaming this program live on our social media handle, that's KBN TV on Facebook. You can go there and also watch the program and participate from there. There's a number that is on your screen. We do want to get interactive with you tonight. As usual, you can call in later on and share your opinions, questions, and contributions on the program tonight. You can also ask questions, and Comrade Kabimba will be at hand to answer some of those questions. We'll be glad to hear your thoughts tonight. Comrade Kabimba, it's a pleasure having you once again, and let's begin from here, because this matter is in public domain, the issue of consent judgment. Many people are talking about this very critical matter, but I would want to begin from this basic understanding and basic level. I have been privileged to pass through law school, so I do understand what a consent judgment is. You are a senior counsel, one of the senior lawyers in the country. You do understand what a consent judgment is, but we do this for the benefit of the Zambians who may not understand exactly. When they hear these consent judgment, what are they? Let's begin from there.
Okay. Paul, put simply, a consent judgment is just what it is. It is a judgment between parties, amongst parties that have a pending litigation or a matter before a judge. Invariably in the High Court. So one party, in this case, has taken the state to court with a claim against the state, and after the pleadings, after the party that is suing has finished, the Attorney General in this case, or the Solicitor General, with what they believe is their case, and the Attorney General realizes that they do not have a very good defense to the matter, the Attorney General then will decide to get into negotiations with the litigant and discuss the terms of how to end that matter outside court, or without allowing the matter to develop further to trial. After they have discussed those terms, and the terms appear reasonable to the Attorney General, and that's very important. The terms put forward by the plaintiff must be reasonable. Why should they be reasonable? Because the Attorney General is exercising that authority of his office on behalf of the Zambian people through what we call the state. Why should the terms be reasonable? Because in effect, that judgment is against the National Treasury. So the Attorney General must take into account everything, the impact of that judgment, the reasonableness of the terms, the impact it will have on the National Treasury, and ensure that that judgment does not alarm the public, as is the case now. Now, let me just make, this point here, Paul, as we are discussing this matter. The Attorney General now is actually an uncle of mine, the direct cousin, the first cousin with my dad, on my dad's maternal side. But, like I've always said, and for what I always stand for, a wrong is a wrong.
Before we get there,
okay?
Before we get there, I want to understand, for the benefit of the viewers,
yeah,
the matter is settled outside the court. What?
It's settled before it goes to trial.
Yes,
before
it goes to trial.
Yeah.
What determines, what criteria is used to determine that this matter, before it proceeds for trial, can be settled through the Attorney General?
The Attorney General and his team would be of the view that they don't have a defense in the matter. Okay? And if they take that view, then instead of wasting the court's time, instead of escalating the costs against the state, they then, to cut down on time and costs, decide that the matter be settled by way of a consent judgment. Yeah.
So it's at the discretion of the Attorney General. The
more or less. It's actually at the discretion of the Attorney General. Because like a nole in criminal matters, the judge hardly questions the terms of the consent judgment. So once the parties have agreed, they have signed the consent judgment or the consent order, as it may be, the hands of the judge are tied. And invariably, the judge would simply proceed to endorse that judgment. And once the judge has done that, he has signed the judgment, the law is that none of the two parties can appeal that judgment.
So no, they can't. Both parties can't appeal that.
They can't appeal that judgment. That is the first condition. The second condition is that the party that has gone to court cannot again go back to court on the same facts. They can't do that. If you want to attack the consent judgment, you have to commence a fresh action and claim whatever, that the terms were not okay, they were unreasonable, or etc., etc. So it is a judgment which is invariably at the discretion of the state, and the state in this case being the Attorney General.
how do we, I'm trying to think, how do we, especially for, as a country, the state, how then do we protect circumstances where the state or the Attorney General has conflict of interest in that case?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. It is very difficult once somebody has been appointed Attorney General. Okay? The view is that, which is a view that I do not agree with, you know, that we have a non-partisan civil service.
You don't agree with that?
I don't agree with that. I've actually canvassed that point in my book. That this is a myth. It has been a myth that we have held for a long time. And it is high time that we debunked this myth and actually get to terms that the Attorney General, for example, in this case, the Solicitor General in the Attorney General's chambers, who were active members of the UPND, and they actually were advocates of the president in the opposition. And they were members, and I'm sure they are still members of the UPND, cannot be said, you know, to be non-partisan. That's the difficulty that you have in this situation. Okay? And I'll give you a contrasting, you know, view to that. When Mr. Sata won the election in 2011, the Attorney General we found in the Attorney General's chambers, in the Ministry of Justice, was the Chief Justice now, Mumba Malila. Okay? He was not a member of the PF. We didn't throw him out because we wanted somebody perceived to be a member of PF. We allowed him to continue. And I left Honorable Justice Malila in the Ministry of Justice by the time, you know, I left that ministry. So I'm giving you a contrast here to show the public and the viewers out there why we are in this difficult situation today. And it is not only in the Attorney General's chambers, it is in many, many institutions where HH has packed these institutions with either non-members of the UPND, non-supporters of the UPND, non-sympathizers of the UPND, and therefore it becomes very difficult for members of the public to appreciate their impartiality in the discharge of their responsibilities in these offices. And this is one thing that I thought that the UPND would actually scratch their conscience and say this is not right. When the first case happened, we thought maybe it was an isolated case. When the second one, you know, happened, we thought that maybe these are two exceptions. But now it seems to be the general rule. Everybody is riding on this, you know, and the colossal sums of money are being paid out.
Question again there, comrade. When the people sue, the people affected,
yeah,
do they indicate how much they are claiming as compensation?
No, because ideally, if for example, you sue for forced imprisonment, okay, you do not state in your claim how much you should be compensated. Okay, what you do is you just state and say that, you know, the police, you know, picked me up, you know, I was locked up, you know, for 5 days, I was not granted bond, you know, and then after that, I was released. In other words, I was inconvenienced. I suffered mental anguish. I suffered embarrassment, humiliation, you know, etc., etc. That is what you say. Now, that is very important, you know, a consideration. Because if this matter went to trial, then you have to lead evidence before the judge. And there are principles that govern forced imprisonment, mental anguish, etc., etc. And even your status. What were you doing? Are you a business person? Are you not a business person? Okay? And you would be cross-examined by the state. So your evidence is not divine. It will be subjected to cross-examination. And the judge at the end of the day, who is the person charged with the making findings of facts and also of the law, will determine the quantum, the amount of money payable to you by way of compensation or damages, as we call them, if he or she is convinced that indeed the imprisonment was unlawful. So why is this important? It is important because then your story is, the veracity of your story, the truth of your story is subjected to an impartial tribunal, an independent judge who listens to you, who takes down evidence, and then makes a determination of the matter. In this particular case, there is no trial. There's no trial.
Hence my question, the criteria. Hence my question again, and the concern I think Zambians have raised.
Yes.
What is the criteria used also to determine why can't the matters proceed for trial?
We don't know.
Why would, I think Zambians would love to see, for example, Frank Tayali bringing evidence that he truly suffered trauma over a gun that was pointed at him.
Exactly, exactly. And also not only that, Paul, if the matter goes before the High Court and the High Court judge rules in your favor as the plaintiff, the state has got a right to appeal to the Supreme Court. If the state thinks that the damages that have been quantified by the High Court judge are unreasonable, they have a right to go to the Court of Appeal and say, yes, maybe this guy was falsely imprisoned, but certainly the quantum, the amount of money that the High Court judge says should be paid to him or her is not right on the following grounds. Because all these things are governed by principles of law. What is dismaying in this case, what is concerning to many citizens, is that that process is not being followed. Okay? And the state has not come out. The Attorney General has not come out, apart from the statement which I saw in the Zambia Daily Mail today as headline from the government spokesperson saying this is a win-win situation. Win-win against who? Or between who? This is only a win-win situation between a member of the UPND and the UPND. I'll give you one example. There is a matter that we have taken to court as economic front. Okay? I will not disclose the parties because this is sub judice. In the writ of summons and the statement of claim by these litigants, they claim to have suffered a loss of business. There is absolutely no evidence in their documents to prove that they're businessmen. And I know some of them myself. They're not business persons. They've never owned a business. But the Attorney General proceeded to sign a consent judgment and get them awarded, amounts of money for loss of business in his understanding of the matter. Okay? That's why the public is alarmed. That's why this thing is causing consternation in the minds of the public. It has never happened, Paul, in the history of this country. I have practiced law for more than 30 years, close to 35 years now.
You don't have precedent in that regard?
No, I've never seen this type of abuse of the consent judgment principle or doctrine like I have seen.
Under the Patriotic Front?
Never.
Did we see any consent judgments?
Not even one.
We never had not even one?
Not even one. Not even one. There is nobody.
Under MMD, under UNEP?
Not even, not to my memory. This thing has come up under UPND. This thing has come up under UPND. Okay? So, we are asking, is this the rule of law that HH was talking about? It can't be. This is abuse of the law.
It's provided for in the law, but maybe before I get to that, who determines these amounts? What criteria do they use to determine that obvious malitator should get 900,000 kwacha?
That's difficult to answer, because you see,
the law should be able to provide a guide. Because
you see what happened in the consent judgment is that the Attorney General in this case says, look, I don't have a defense, guys, and I don't think that this is a matter that or should proceed to trial. Okay, so then the lawyers for the other side say, okay, then we demand the 1.5 million kwacha, for example. And then the Attorney General says, no, not 1.5 million kwacha. That would be too much. Okay, 1 million kwacha. No, guys, maybe not 1 million kwacha. Okay, then 800,000 kwacha. Then the Attorney General says, okay, then 800,000 kwacha. And the consent judgment is entered into. So actually, there is no basis. I don't think that the Attorney General would come to this program and say the reason why, let's take the example of this family, that Mapenzi. Yeah, 3.5 million kwacha. Do you know that if that matter went to trial, it's like a fatal accident, or claim. It has to take a lot into account. What was the level of education of Mapenzi? What was her age at the time when, What is the difference between her age when she was killed and, when she would have retired, for example, if she had been working in the civil service? Okay? Vis-a-vis the life expectancy. What was she able to earn in life? So it's not as if you just become emotional and say, oh no, the person is dead and therefore give No. Judges, courts don't deal with emotions. They deal with the law. So they would look at the court would look at all these things and then determine the quantum. But if you went to the Attorney General today and say, tell us how you arrived at 3.5 million kwacha, I don't think you'd be able to give you that.
Can the Attorney General, does the Attorney General in this circumstance give reasons why or evidence why they feel they don't have a defense? Because no. I feel it's a very lame excuse to give.
That is in one case which I saw, the Attorney General said a consent judgment is between parties and the parties are not obliged to disclose any reasons. Yes, he's right. If the parties are private, Poshingongo, Wynter, Kambwili, none of us is obliged, to give reasons to the public. In this particular case, this is not money payable by the Attorney General from his pocket.
It's a state. This
is not money payable from HH's pocket. This is money payable from the National Treasury. It is people's money. And therefore, the Attorney General has to make sure that his judgment is judicious. It would make sense, to a member of the public. Who is the owner of this money? It's not his money. If it were an action between him and another private citizen, nobody would question it. But to be rolling out, such colossal amounts of money like we have seen under UPND, I can tell you, that this cannot end here. Somebody somewhere in future will have to be held accountable for this kind of...
But this is provided for in our law. So if it's provided for and it's being done within the confinements of the law, why is there so much uproar from the people?
Look. The point is that the Attorney General, being the custodian, of that basket from which, court judgments are satisfied, must exercise reasonableness. Okay? There's a principle of reasonableness in law. What would be the reasonable man on the street say? If you stopped anybody, even at Soweto Port today, and said to them, this member of the UPND was locked up for 3 days, and he has been paid 1 million kwacha, you would see how the eyes would blow in the sockets, of the fellow at Soweto. 1 million kwacha? Kwa fakatabe mujite jumaseo zigoma for 3 days. I think, So that's a reasonable person on the street. And that's why you have seen this kind of alarm from members of the public.
Let's look at the figures involved. 450,000 kwacha for Transport Minister Frank Tayali. There's 500,000 for Mrs. Mukuni and others. There's 6.4 million for the treason charge victims. To mention a few, of course, now we have others like William Banda. We have the family of Mapenzi Chibulu.
Yeah, because now everybody thinks, go to the bank, but the Attorney General's chambers has become a bank.
Now
it's even bigger than the Barclays Bank.
Latest today, obvious Mwaliteta getting 900,000 kwacha. This seems to be absurd, Comrade Kawemba.
I'll tell you, let me tell you this. And I'm not being personal, and I'm not being... When I read about obvious Mwaliteta, I agreed with that award. I agreed with that award. I think he suffered injustice under PF. I think he suffered. And I want to single out, I went to prison 3 times to visit Mwaliteta, and I was prevented from seeing him.
Mwaliteta deserves 900,000.
I think he deserves 900,000.
Because he suffered under the hands of the Patriotic Front.
He was in Chimbwakaira for 1 year, 12 months. He came out and found his children were out of school. He came out and found that his trucks that were running were on the rocks. He came out and found a tattered family. It's like Mandela, if you know Mandela's story. By the time Mandela came out of prison, on Robben Island, he found that his daughters, had children with different men. And it depressed Mandela. That's a kind of trauma that Mwaliteta suffered. At the hands of PF, that could not justify why Mwaliteta was locked up for for more than a year, and even prevented those of us that wanted to visit him in prison from doing so. I don't think that was right.
Even the case that he was charged with, you feel that was not correct?
No, it was not correct. They ended up entering Enoli. They entered Enoli in that case. So yes, Paul, let's be fair. There were certain things that PF did that reasonable human beings, normal human beings should not have done against others. Certainly. And Mwaliteta's case is one of them. But for the others, I think it is an act that those that are receiving these amounts today may go to the bank with a smile. The lucky ones are those that will be found dead when the UPND government is out of power in 2026. But I can tell you that those that will be found alive will be held accountable.
I have a colleague, just the way you've singled out the case of Mwali Teta.
Yes.
A colleague of mine on our breakfast show, Comrade Innocent Piri, singled out the case of Frank Tayali and said that was indeed trauma, because that was a serious sin that definitely someone could have been affected, and the 450,000 kwacha seemed to be okay.
It could be right. It could be right. If you were poor, you were living in the environment of the PF then, where there was so much lawlessness and thuggery, and everybody's life was at risk, and nobody seemed to be answerable to anybody, and you had a gun to your head, I'm sure you'd be traumatized. I'm sure you'll be traumatized. I don't know the circumstances of Frankie Tayali's case, but certainly going by the environment that the PF had cultivated, I think he would deserve that amount. But the case that I told, I referred to, which we have taken to court, is a case of 7 youths. You know what happened? They decided to exclude 2 youths who were PF in that arrest and detention, and only compensated 5 non-UPND youths.
The other 2 are non-PF youths. The other 2 that were left were non-PF.
They were non-PF youths, but they were arrested together with 5 other non-UPND youths. And in the infinite wisdom of the Attorney General, the 2 were excluded, the 5 were compensated. Large sums of money, purporting that they were business people. Okay? Again, the matter is sub judice, so I will not mention the names. So,
but you've said you've taken the matter to court, right?
Yes.
And earlier on you said when a judgment is made in a consent judgment, you cannot appeal. The 2 parties can't appeal?
No, we have commenced a fresh action.
Okay.
You only attack a consent judgment by commencing a fresh action. Okay? So, I don't know Honorable Frank Tayali's circumstances, but reminiscing on what was going on under PF.
The treason, for example, the treason charge, and the victim, the 6.4 million kwacha.
I would actually look. These are not the first treason accused people. Okay? These are not the first accused treason people. Okay, I'll give you an example. General Godfrey Mianda, when he was accused of treason in the group of the Shamanas, his wife died while he was in prison, while he was in detention. He was not allowed to go and mourn his wife. He was finally acquitted. Not entered, acquitted. Nobody compensated him.
Maybe he didn't sue us that.
Yeah, but that was not even, he knew.
Yeah. They can't compensate you if you have not sued the state.
No. I'll give you another example. Dini Mungomba, he spent 14 months in prison under framed up charges against him for treason. And when he came out, a commission of inquiry was set up. which recommended that he be paid 25 million kwacha. A lot of money that time. The state refused to pay.
On what grounds?
They said, let him go to court. Okay? Let him go to court so that the matter can be, the matter can go to trial. So I'm making a point here, that there could be exceptions to this trend. The problem that the public has is that the exceptions appear to be the general rule. That is what is concerning to the public. The exceptions appear to be the general rule.
But if we look at all these cases, Comrade Kambwili, don't you feel that if we begin to itemize case by case,
yes,
you begin to understand that possibly these consent judgments that are being passed really are in the best interest of the victims? I'm glad you've singled out a case of obvious morality and the 900,000.
Because I know the facts of that situation very well.
The case, for example, of Frank Tayali.
Because again, I've not spoken to Frank Tayali, but I know the kind of thuggery that went on under PF. I didn't agree with it then. I don't agree with it today.
We know, of course, the treason charge victims and the kind of suffering they endured in that fracas, if I can call it that. Of course, President Hichilema was also part of it, just that maybe because of his head of state, he recused himself from that matter. But we understand, and Zambians generally also understand the kind of suffering that the victims in the treason case underwent.
Look, I think let's clear this matter. The issue is not whether or not the victims underwent some suffering. Surely, if you are in police cells for 2 days, for 3 days, you have undergone suffering, especially in our police cells. I went to see one of my colleagues, at Kawata police station, and certainly the environment is just not good. Okay, so that's one part. The part that is in issue is the quantum, the amount that is being payable to these victims, because they are victims. Okay, the amounts that are being payable, I think that is where the indiscretion is.
The amount should be good enough,
reasonable. Yes,
you can't give someone 50,000 kwacha and call it a compensation for suffering in the hands of the police for crimes that you possibly did not commit. You think that is a mockery, right?
No. Look,
so you don't expect smaller amounts, right?
No. Look, that's why I'm saying that if these matters went to trial, then findings of fact would be made by the judge. Findings of fact, what actually happened, what were the circumstances of your detention. Okay? So, that is where the Attorney General has failed. If I were the Attorney General, I would allow these matters to go all the way, so that I keep my hands clean, so that I protect the state. And then let an impartial tribunal make those findings and award the quantum. I would respect the due process of law to take its course.
Why do we have a provision in our law that allows for consent judgments? The framers of our legislation, what was the actual intention?
It is to cut down on the costs for both parties in a case. Okay? Let me repeat this. What the problem is here is that the Attorney General is not a private person, is not representing a private people, a private person. is representing the state. So the money that is being paid out is not coming from the pocket of a private person.
Yes,
it's coming.
It's a state that was sued.
It's coming from the national treasury, and therefore, he ought to exercise reasonableness.
Well,
and certainly, some of the amount, in my view, again, I go back, to the case that I think I've looked at. To have a fellow that says that I'm a business person when they don't even sell talk time on the street, I think it's unfair. I think it's unreasonable. So, and yet, if these guys went on to trial, yes, the judge may find that, the imprisonment was false. It was wrongful. But you probably give them 150,000 kwacha each. That's what I'm saying. Something will be payable to them. The issue here is the quantum, the quantities being paid out. That's the issue.
You feel the quantities are too huge.
They're not too huge, they're unreasonable.
They're unreasonable.
I'm using that word.
Because you and I understand, and the Zambians do understand, that there's no particular definition of reasonableness.
I've given you an example of a fellow on the street.
Yes.
There is the standard of a reasonable man in law.
Yeah, because if you are to ask, for example, obvious Maliteter, the reasonable amount that can act as a relief for that wrong arrest that he underwent, he will not even possibly give a standard amount. If you are in the same shoe, you possibly give a different amount. You don't ask obvious Maliteter. You ask, the fellow on the street. Everyone, comrade, would give different amounts. Yes. Everyone would. The law of average in arithmetic. Yeah, you divide, so you get an average. That's what there is. So what makes in arithmetic? What makes you think that 900,000 kwacha, for example, to Maliteter is unreasonable? No. I've said the Maliteter's case is not unreasonable. I hope you are following me. Yeah, no, I'm following. I've said that Maliteter's case is not the 900,000 kwacha. In my view, is not unreasonable. 450 to Tayali may not be unreasonable. And I'm creating a clear distinction here between Maliteter's case, which I know very well, vis-a-vis Frank Tayali's case, whose circumstances I'm assuming, because I know both, colleagues. I know both of them. So what I'm saying is that if you lived under PF, and all of us did, and you were in a situation that Frank Tayali found himself in, with a gun to your head, certainly you would be traumatized. Certainly you would suffer mental anguish. That's all that I'm saying. But in contrasting those two cases, I have another case that I know very well, where the quantum seems to be on the basis of loss of business. Why isn't it in public domain, the case you're referring to? Quite strange. No. In fact, it was reported. It was reported. So I'm giving you a contrast. Okay. So I'm saying, Paul, that there are some of these cases whose amounts are reasonable. Some of them are excessive. They're excesses. So I'm creating this distinction, very clear distinction. I want to ask two questions before I open the phone lines. We have quite a number of phone calls coming in and quite a number of messages. You can participate on the program tonight. We're looking at rethinking the implications of consent judgments. Comrade Wynter is my guest tonight. He's former Justice Minister, Economic Front President currently. There's a number on your screen that you can use to send us your messages, questions, and contributions. You can also call us. I'll be picking your calls shortly. You can also drop comments on our Facebook page, that is KBN TV. Go there, drop in some of your questions, and I'll take time to read out some of those comments here. Two quick questions before I open the phone lines, Comrade Kabimba. You have mentioned from your position as a lawyer who has practiced in this country, according to you, for over 30 years. And
it's not according to me, that's the truth. So it's not like it's a claim.
You have practiced in this country for over 30 years.
Yes.
And you're saying this is such kind of consent judgments are only happening. You've only seen them under the UPND administration. Away from the issue of compensation.
No, the trend. No, let's clear that.
Yes.
This systemic trend. Okay. What is happening under UPND is that this is becoming a trend, and a very, very dangerous trend, unknown in the past.
Okay.
You asked me a question earlier. Did you have such a consent judgment under PF? I said no. Okay. Under MMD, I don't know. So I'm being I'm being very deliberate, yes, and specific, so that I don't mislead the viewers out there, and I don't mislead the public.
What consent judgments do you remember of in the past as a lawyer that have been passed in this country?
I know consent judgments that were, for example, I handled a matter between my client and ZAWA, okay, the Zambia Wildlife Authority then. We entered into a consent judgment. Okay? And my client, were paid.
Okay.
Okay? We entered into a consent judgment. So, ZAWA was a state enterprise then. But we had to make sure that the terms of the consent judgment were tailored in such a way that when the lawyer for ZAWA presented that, to the board and say, listen, we have a case here which we have decided to discontinue, to trial stage, and what we have agreed to pay is so much, the board would find that amount reasonable. It's not as if, the ZAWA lawyer just picked, the figure from the ceiling board, because he knew that he was accountable to the board. That's the difference. Okay? So the distinction is very important here. Very, very important.
Great. The issue of former State House political advisor, Kaiser Zulu, who is charged with threatening to shoot at 4 people in Kambwili in 2019. Questions have arisen. Why has the state, being one of the respondents, decided to pay on behalf of the other defendants?
Why has the state?
Why has the state, who is one of the respondents, decided to pay on behalf of the other defendants? Kaiser Zulu was charged with threatening to shoot at 4 people and was being sued, and of course the state was cited in the case. But the state this time around has decided to pay on behalf of the other defendants.
That's wrong. That's wrong. Okay, the four guys sued Kaiser Zulu in their private capacity.
Yes,
and sued Kaiser Zulu in his capacity then as political advisor to the president, and then joined the state. Why should the state pay?
Because they were joined.
No. No. That, in my view, is wrong. That, in my view, is wrong.
He was in his official position as political advisor to the president. Possibly that's why the state was even joined to the case.
Yes, but the four plaintiffs, had 2 defendants, Kaiser Zulu and the Attorney General. Okay? So if there is any money that is payable, it must come from Kaiser Zulu and the state.
Or the state?
No, it can't. It can't. Look, I don't think one of the duties of Kaiser Zulu was to go around wielding a gun. Okay. I don't think that discharging an unlawful responsibility is part of a civil servant. So certainly, Kaiser Zulu should have been held personally responsible for that. He was not employed for that. Again, that was just the systemic indiscipline that we saw in PF. I'm sorry. Okay, when things broke down irretrievably.
Let me pick up my first set of callers for tonight. There's a number on your screen. You can use it to contact us tonight. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from.
Mr. President.
Your name and where you're calling us from.
I think I'm not going to say my name.
That is a problem with Zambians. Just tell us your name. This is your country.
Okay, my name is Wynter.
Exactly.
You may proceed.
Yes. They have followed very well the Honorable Wynter. I think yes, there are some points where he has just said very well, but I'm sure he has emphasized on a point of view he has never seen. In short, the way they've been giving this type the amount of money to people who were found in all these scandals. Yes, he has emphasized that he has only witnessed it in this UPND. But I would love also to advise to say the president, before to conclude in that way, let us also condemn the arrogance of the previous regime.
I've done that, my brother. I've done that.
To me, I've never seen a regime which actually misbehaved into that level. The arrogance that he had, yes, it's not okay.
Yeah.
Later on, I heard him also saying the amount that they gave to Mapenzi Chibulo. I think the comments he passed, I think they are not okay. Him is a parent, he's got children. And then imagine you take your child to a university and then he's killed. Honestly speaking, how would you feel as a parent? Would you be given, let's say, 50,000 or let's say 100,000?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
As you conclude, sir. As you conclude.
Yes, the parental care he had, and then let me just finish the text, sir.
Please move quickly to your point as you call us.
Look, Paul. I think let's
let me just pick one more.
Okay.
You're through to the big hour. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your name and where you're calling us from.
This is Kaumachora, calling from Kipwe.
You may proceed, Wachola.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the program, and you know I'm one person that likes following Honorable Wynter program. But I just wanted to correct one assertion which he made, where he said when PF took over, they found the current Chief Justice, Mr. Mumba Madira, as Attorney General.
Yes.
That is not correct.
What is the correct position?
The correct position is when PF was taking over, Mr. Mumba Madira had been fired by Rupia Banda, and he appointed Abid Shonga as Attorney General. Comrade Wynter remembers very well the issue surrounding Zamteode. That's why Mumbamadla was fired. And when PF took over, they didn't keep Abid Shonga Attorney General. They appointed someone in Musa Mwenye, who was believed to be a PF sympathizer, the current ACC board chairman today. Him also was later fired by Edgar Lungu when he became president, because they had differed on the issue of who should act as president after Michael had died. So I wanted to put that into
to record.
To correct the council but to say what he said there is not correct.
We do appreciate your contribution.
Okay. Bakaoma.
Thank you so much.
Bakaoma.
Allow me to pick the third caller, then I give you a chance to respond to the three, so that we manage some of the contributions coming in from our viewers tonight. You're through to the big hour. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from.
Hello.
You're through to the big hour. Your name and where you're calling us from.
Yes, Ivashingoko.
Mkwa, ishina yenu.
Yo, Patsoni Lungu.
From where?
Minudu, Kulusaguru Minudu, right?
Mkwa Iwa Patson, to my petition.
And the President. Mr. President, how are you?
I'm fine, my person. Mulishani, kuminudu.
Mr. President, namcha atuketa my shoes munobwino. Namcha President problem opo idiapa.
Proceed. Please proceed. We can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah. Problem opo idiapa ati. Ababa nipo aba. The reform tax accepted balance shanya. Yeah, that's the only problem. They don't accept that balance shanya kaidi. I don't know if you are getting me.
Yes,
we are, Patson.
Yeah. They don't want to accept that balance shanya bantu abakaidi. They think what niba Messiah. Mr. Wynter Kabimba.
Yes.
Big man, we are behind you and we appreciate you from the big man.
Go and mobilize community Udugo. Go and mobilize for economic front, Patson.
And after this program, you give me
Let me allow you to respond to those three.
Okay, let me start with the Kaoma.
Yes, please.
I'm just correct his facts. Okay? Bakaoma, your facts are wrong, my brother. When I was appointed Minister of Justice in September of 2012, the Attorney General I found was Mumba Malila. That's the Attorney General I found in the office. Musa Mwenye was appointed Solicitor General in September of 2011 and became Attorney General later after Mumba Malila had been elevated to the bench. Mutembo Nchito was appointed at the same time as Musa Mwenye as Director of Public Prosecutions, and I recommended both names to the President. Musa as the Solicitor General, to Mumba Malila, and Mutembo Nchito as DPP. So your facts, sir, are wrong. They are not correct. Because I worked with all these people myself.
The Abid Shonga that you talked about?
I didn't work with Abid Shonga. Okay? The man I found manning the Attorney General's chambers was Mumba Malila. So the facts are not correct.
You want to respond to Ephraim and Patson?
What did Ephraim say?
Ephraim was simply also just reminding you that if as a parent you gave a call.
Oh yeah. Thanks for that. Look, we are discussing the law here. If you ask for my personal emotions, Ephraim, they may be different. But I think what Paul is asking me is to lay down the principles of law. Okay? And when these matters go before an impartial tribunal, before a judge is not involved in the emotions of the case. A judge is guided by the principles of law. So yes, if you asked me how would I feel if Mapenzi were my daughter, my answer would be different. Totally different. Because yes, like you say, then I have to think like a father. What if it were my daughter? What if it were my son? But if you put me in the situation of exercising my responsibilities as Attorney General, I have to divest myself of those emotions because I'm discharging a public duty. So we have to be very careful about this. I know that we are talking about a dead person.
And someone has actually asked here, Comrade Dinkins from Mungu is saying, Honorable Kabemba, please guide me. What is the cost of a life?
There's no cost to life. Very good question. Okay? There's no cost to life. But even when you have a fatal accident claim, the judge has to put a cost to that life. So morally, philosophically, there's no cost to life. But the law is such that it puts a cost to life. Not me, not you. And that's how society is organized. It's organized under principles of law to create a stable society. So I agree entirely. You know, I can answer your question. Morally, my answer is simple. There is no cost to life. Legally, there is a cost to life.
Of course, Patson basically was contributions and
Patson wants to campaign for economic front in many ways. So remind me to give him the number at the end of
yeah, through to the big hour. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from. Yes, Vastumbeko.
Yeah, nami posha na kuposha ba President Wynter Kavimba.
Kama yoyo mchwani.
Yona wale kupona wa President mchwani.
Ni tumezi mshemi kina yo nina.
Batiriro aitumera kuli mwarugulelera.
Kozo.
Ni tiambika kuti ba President Wynter Kavimba baliko. Banzatu banatiti abali muma mochari bali mumanda koma ipetiambika mulungunda wa fopanda politics Mzambia kulipe inepaneka pano ndine students waba Wynter mu politics koma chazo na nchabuti nekwilizana na bebe muri binangu timashushana.
That is healthy. That is healthy.
Yeah. Abo ba Wynter ndingakambeko binangu bamene nizi bapali bebe. Monga ijatami amene benzo pita na makofi ni Mkairo Road.
Vastumbeko, we want you to contribute on the topic under discussion tonight.
Chifukwa mchazo na ndiye chiri mu mutima wa ba Wynter.
Zikomo kwambiri Vastumbeko for coming through. You can also come through on the number that's displayed on the screen. I have very limited time. We'll pick very few calls tonight. We have quite a number of messages as well that I would want to ensure that we read out on the program tonight. You're through to the big hour. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from quickly.
Good evening. My name is Mr. Peter, calling you from within Lusaka.
You may proceed, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Honorable Wynter.
Good evening, Peter.
Yes, I just wanted to find out, because these compensations, it's surprising, because there's a woman who was hit by the presidential motorcade, and the government offered to compensate him, to compensate the family 10,000 kwacha.
How much?
Someone who was incarcerated together with the president for the wrongdoing those they did, compensated 6.4 million. And someone who lost her life with a motorcade. is being compensated 10,000. What's the take over that?
Because she was not UPND.
Over the same compensation for Honorable Minister
Frank Tayali.
When did the Tayali sue the government? Because we didn't even hear any no, Mr. Tayali sued the government. We just said that no, Tayali has been compensated. No trial, no what. What is happening?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Peter, for coming through. Looking for last two callers or so for tonight because of our time. You are through to the big hour. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from. Just reduce the volume on your TV set as you call us. Let me read out some messages, President Kabimba. We have quite a number of messages and some very good questions that are coming in your direction. Now, if there's no cost of life, I think people are very concerned about the comment you made about the life that was lost. If there's no cost of life, please, if you are the Attorney General now, what could have been a reasonable consent? That's a question coming to you. Honorable Kabimba, you are very consistent in your political career and non-tribal. God bless you, Bishop Chileshe. Thank you, Bishop Chileshe, for coming through on the program tonight. Mr. Kabimba, sir, ECL call on you to work with him during Sata Memorial. Are you going to join or work with PF, considering what ECL did to you, moving with coffins for you to leave PF? The issue of coffins seems to be coming up. Chris Mwanda from Kambwili just wanted to say we are watching everything and it will surely backfire.
Yes.
What they're doing is simply sharing money and daylight robbery. Let them enjoy now. We will follow them later. Good evening, KBN. Not 100% for Mr. Tali compensation. So the 15-year-old boy in Kankoyo in Mufulira, Mkawapela Shinga. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm a UPND supporter, but consent judgments are just way out of this world. The monies in these cases is too much. Ziwa in Mutendere. Thank you so much, Ziwa, for coming through. Good evening, Paul. The problem we have in Zambia is that the three arms of government are not independent, but whoever comes in power takes over those. I'm Nancy from Livingston. Thank you so much, Nancy. It's good to also know that women are contributing to the program. Yeah. We do advocate for women to call on the big hour. Please. Good evening, KBN. My concern is that we have so many cases of almost similar manner that have been pending in the courts for years now. How is it now that certain individuals have their cases dealt with so quickly and they're now being quickly compensated? Is justice selective? Is justice now only favoring those aligned to the powers that be? Let me allow you to respond to some of these questions and contributions, comrade.
Well, let me comment on the issue that one of our colleagues has raised of the woman that was knocked down by the presidential motorcade and died. And the family was only compensated how much? 18,000 kwacha.
He says 10,000. Not sure of the facts, so I may not want.
Yeah, I think there was some amount like that. I think there was some amount like that. You know. Now, this actually creates a contrast. This actually creates a contrast. You know, and you are left with this inescapable conclusion. If you look at the amounts of money, that this is about UPND or being UPND.
Is that the case?
Yes.
Some have echoed your similar statements and said, look at the people involved. For example, Honorable Tayali, look at Mrs. Mukuni, look at the treason charge victims,
yes.
Look at the family of Mapenzi Chibulo, look at, for example, William Banda, look at obvious Mwali Teta.
All those are UPND affiliated.
Mapenzi.
Well, that arose out of a UPND incident, if you remember. Okay? I don't want to go beyond that, but it arose out of a UPND incident. Paul, the point is this, that we must reach a point where we are developing a society of rules. and rules that are applicable to everybody. And applicable to everybody in the most predictable situation. And that's why Bachireshe is saying, I'm not tribal, because my tribe is truth. That's my tribe. My tribe is truth. What is true, that's what I develop affinity with. What is wrong, in my view, in my character, and in my way of life is wrong, whether you are my friend or you are my relative. So, it is important that those that hold public office must also carry a public conscience, that they are discharging those responsibilities on behalf of the Zambian people. And in so doing, they must be judicious. They must, look at the bigger picture. Because I can tell you, and I want to repeat myself, what the Attorney General is doing is just causing problems for all these guys for the future.
A precedent is being set.
That I can tell you, and I can swear to the living Lord.
I think don't you feel it's important when people are being traumatized, when people are being arrested on false charges, that when it's time to sue, they should have capacity to sue those people? I think it's very important. So
I'm not saying, please let me repeat this point. I'm not saying that the compensation is not due to them. And I want the viewers to get this very clear. The quarrel, the consternation, the dismay from the public are the amounts. And amounts in certain cases which are unjustifiable.
Can you give an example? Apart from that case you've given about those businessmen, apart from that one, from this consent judgment we've seen, which case do you feel the amount is unreasonable?
Look, I don't want to be unfair. I've given you the outline of the principles of law.
From the outlines you've given,
I've given you
because you're raising a very serious point, Comrade Kalima, here, that some amounts are not reasonable, and I'm asking a very basic question. From these consent judgments we've seen, which one do you feel the amount is unreasonable?
How much were the three accused?
6.4 million.
6.4 million for 127
days.
27 days.
Yes.
Okay. What were those guys doing before they were prison charged? What were they doing? What was their lifestyle?
Individual cases, of course.
Yeah. What were their lifestyle? Okay. So these are issues which the state must answer. And the problem is that even if you went to the High Court tomorrow to go and conduct a search, you won't find, the facts. Apart from the claim, which is subjective, invariably subjective. Okay? This is about, with the trend which is emerging now, everybody is thinking Vaboga. So even the claims that are coming up now are silly. 900,000 kwacha, for my big brother William Banda, which he may get ultimately. That's the point that I'm making. Okay? And there was somebody who says, but we are not condemning PF. I am. And I picked a case of Frank Tayali. That if indeed that is what happened, everybody, maybe not everybody, most of these youths, under PF were wielding guns. And some of them, they didn't even have license to, to carry guns. So it was a breakdown of law and order under PF.
Is that happening under the UPND right now? Do we have current happenings and circumstances that could point to possible cases that will warrant such kind of compensation?
Not to the degree of PF. I don't think
not to the degree of PF.
I don't think anybody can beat, the PF lawlessness. I'm sorry to say. I have to be charitable to the UPND. Okay? I don't think anybody, not even UNIP, would beat the lawlessness that we saw under PF. Please. Nobody. PF set its own benchmark, which is unbeatable.
They argue to that aspect. The PF members themselves, which you are one of them, they argue that aspect. And others are even saying, whoa, the lawlessness we are seeing in UPND is even worse than what was there in the PF.
No. Let's be fair, Paul. Let's be reasonable and let's be fair. What we saw under PF maybe can only be seen in hell, not on planet Earth. Okay?
That's quite a strong statement.
And I mean it. And I mean it. And I don't think, I've got colleagues, in PF, including ECL himself. But I can tell you, and I can say this to his face, if he's watching this program, what we saw under his rule was abominable. It was a sacrilege to this society.
You are likening it to hell.
Yes. Yes. And for all the wrongs that UPND has done so far, I don't think they've beaten that Olympic record of the PF. They haven't. Okay? We want UPND out in 2026 for totally different reasons. And, mainly the economic hardships that the Zambian people are facing.
Not lawlessness?
That is very low on the ladder. The UPND will be thrown out of office for the following: high interest rates today, high inflation, unemployment by the youths, the high cost of living.
Are you in one way saying that we've seen some levels of improvement in that regard when it comes to the rule of law, when it comes to the lawlessness that we saw? We've seen some degree of improvement under the UPND administration.
Let me make this clear.
Yeah.
The rule of law is not the same as law and order. That's how President Chiluba used to define it. Okay? It's not the same. The rule of law is a totally different doctrine in law compared with if you compare it with the law and order. Okay? We have seen
with quite a number of similarities.
We have seen under the UPND government a marginal reduction in lawlessness. Marginal reduction in lawlessness. Okay? That we have seen. And I want to repeat, I don't think any government ever will beat the lawlessness of that we saw under PF. It was just a completely breakdown of law and order.
In conclusion, Comrade Kabimba, recently former President Edgar Lungu announced his return and called for other opposition parties to join hands in fighting for a better Zambia. Just today, you are quoted in a newspaper attacking PF member Chishimba Kambwili, that he is a person that should not be trusted. Doesn't that affect the idea of a united opposition front?
I don't want to unite with people I don't trust. Okay?
You don't trust Chishimba Kambwili?
I don't trust him. I want to be honest with you.
You don't trust Chishimba Kambwili?
No. I would never trust Chishimba Kambwili. If you look at his past record, I would not trust him. And if that is what the opposition unit means, I'm sorry, I'm not part of it. Look, I want, Paul, to contribute to the development of a society of men of honesty and integrity. I want to be judged by the company I keep. And that company that I keep must not generate consternation in people and dismay. It must be company that, reflects on me and my character. So I was not attacking him, Kishimba Kambwili. All that I was saying, I was agreeing with his nephew. Look, if you look at the video by Kambwili, which has been, holding rank, in him. Look at what he says about going back to PF. I can't go back to PF. And suggesting that I should go back to PF is an insult. I can never go and work with Edgar Lungu unless Edgar Lungu is out, because the man is corrupt. And he goes on and on and on. And today, Kishimba Kambwili is whining and dining with the Edgar Lungu. How can I trust, a man like that? How can I, in the name of opposition unity and working together? I'm sorry, I can't be part of that.
Can you trust TCL?
Look, I don't want, to be picking. You are referring.
I'm asking this with a very as an important question, because one of the things that the Zambians have been asking for is a united opposition front that can unseat the UPND come 2026. And when we talk about key figures, the Patriotic Front right now is under the leadership of two people, whether it's Mao Sampa or it is Edgar Lungu. But if we're talking about Edgar Lungu, would you trust Edgar Lungu?
Let me answer your question this way. I have heard this theory. It's an old theory. It is a theory that ran very high during MMD. You cannot defeat MMD alone as PF. No opposition political party in this country would defeat, MMD alone. And therefore, close ranks as opposition political parties. We went into the pact with UPND, which pleased everybody and gave hope, to everybody. And when that pact, broke up, a lot of people, including my colleagues in UPF, in PF, blamed me and said, I wanted the pact, to fail because I wanted to be vice president. Because if the pact had succeeded, then the HH was going to be the vice president. I made a statement and said, PF is going to win this election alone. I prophesied. I didn't need a papa. I done my homework as Secretary General of the party. I was chairman of the campaign and strategy committee of the party. I was chairperson of the manifesto committee. I raised part of the funds, within and outside. If you remember, I was almost arrested, at the Lusaka International Airport by the DEC. So I knew exactly what I was talking about. And what happened? PF went on to win that election with a wide margin between RB and the Microsat. So I have never subscribed, to this theory that if you want to unseat UPND, you can only do so in terms of numbers. Because remember, even in numbers, there are positive numbers and negatives. Once you drop below 0, it's -1. And what does -1 give you, or -20? Nothing. So this theory that politics is about numbers, so you can go, and grab everybody and put them together and heighten, your numbers, irrespective of the character of those people, is something that I don't subscribe to. So yes, I subscribe to the principle of opposition, unity and coalition. But no, I I will not be dragged into swimming in the same river with people that I think will conversely damage my character. Okay? I think I have a character to protect. I have to protect my character. I know there are good people, Paul, in PF. There are good people. There are good people in UPND that I'm prepared to work with. They have colleagues in UPND, have colleagues in PF that is still subscribed to Michael Sata's ideals. A PF which is pro-poor. Okay? A PF that is disciplined. They are there. So those that want to move on with Michael Sata's ideals, we are here as Economic Front. Because that's what we stand for. But a PF of hooliganism, a PF of thuggery, a PF of lawlessness,
you would not work with?
No, I'm sorry.
Would you work with ECL?
ECL is not PF.
He's the president of the faction of the PF.
Yes, but that is a problem.
Would you work with ECL?
Look, let me, you are taking me into another, don't cut this discussion short. I have said, and I've said this in my book, that the problem with the political parties, in Zambia, they're actually not political parties. I call them social gatherings, like a funeral place. You can go and attend a funeral, even if you don't know the man who has died. Even if you don't believe in the man who has died. So I call them social gatherings of people that come together to fulfill legal requirements. And then they find a figurehead who is supposed to be the overall fellow and cultivate in him or her the personality cult. Okay? And that's why you keep on saying ECL. You are not saying PF. You're talking about ECL.
You've answered the issue of the PF. I wanted to be clear on the issue of ECL.
No, ECL is not PF. ECL is just one of the members of PF. I'm discussing PF in its entirety. Okay? And the history of the PF we saw under ECL. That's the entity I'm discussing. Okay? And I'm discussing this within the context of so-called opposition unity, so-called opposition coalition. Look, the issue here is not removing HH as an individual. That's not the issue. We have removed presidents before. Why is minimum still expensive? There's how many people removed ECL in 2021? Why is inflation still high? Why are interest rates still high? If the problem was ECL as an individual. We are talking about the construction of a political party which the Zambians can use as a vehicle to develop and construct a civilized society away from all these wrongs that we have seen from MMD, from UNIP, MMD, up to UPND today. That's the group of men and women I want to be party to. That's the group of men and women I want to work with. The church is not my enemy. None of the guys in the men and women in UPND are my enemies. They are my colleagues. They are Zambians. They are fellow Zambians like me. I am in this project, Paul, to ensure that I contribute within the remaining years of my life to bequeath to this country and to future generations a better society than this.
President Kambwili, I do want to appreciate you for coming.
Let me just give you the number, to
yes,
Patson, here is your number, Mana, in Minute. Please call this number. You are Patson. I hope you are not in bed. 0973 77 773846. 0973 773846. Please call that number as tomorrow, as quickly as possible. The owner of that number is a man called Chimpi Mulenga. And the other number is 0971 734882. 0971 734882. The owner of that number is Comrade Isaac Sakanya. Call one of those numbers or both, and you'll get a very good reception. Now, Paul, you're closing.
Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you very much.
It's always a pleasure interacting with you on the Big Hour.
Thank you, and thank you very much, dear viewers, and for all your questions, your comments, and your remarks about the program.
Apologies, we couldn't take a number of calls and text messages tonight. We were looking at rethinking the implications of the consent judgments. My guest was President Wynter, former Minister of Justice and current President of the Economic Front. On behalf of the entire production crew, and of course my producer, Samson Lukwanda, who is our news and current affairs manager here. Thank you so much for always finding time to catch the Big Hour every Tuesday and Wednesday from 20:30 to 22 hours. I'm back again next week, Tuesday, at the same time. My name is Paul Shingongo. Keep watching KBN TV.